It's awesome. A professional must have installed it. Wait a minute. No, it was only me. G'day folks, it's DIY Guy 123 here, bringing you another do-it-yourself video. Look at this gorgeous ceramic tile floor. Heads under closets, under appliances, around corners. 2 days ago, I didn't know how to install ceramic tile floor, but I did a bunch of reading, talked to some pros at the tile shop, and this is the result. Looks great. After watching my video, you too can put it down yourself. Okay, we're going to review all of the tools and equipment required to remove ceramic tile, cut it, install it, grout it. It's going to be awesome. So, first section, personal protective equipment. You're definitely going to want knee pads, gloves, eye protection, face mask, a trim saw. You're going to need this to cut underneath the door casings. I also don't have shown here a pry bar that would be required to get baseboard trim out of the way. For removing tile, ways to remove it, you can use a chisel like this with a 1-inch wide bit. If you want to smooth out grout, you can get a wider chisel like this. You can use a grinder to put a sharper edge on it. That is a brutal way to spend a weekend. Electric hammer. This is actually a hammer drill, but it drills or it hammers or both. So in hammer mode, and I use this 1-inch bit to break the tiles up, and I use this 3-inch bit to smooth the mortar out. If you're really looking for a workout, you could try it using an ice scraper like this by hand. I don't recommend it. Ring shank nails. These are 1.25 inches to hold the underlay down to the subfloor. And then these are 2 and I guess a half. I was running these through the underlay subfloor into the joist. That's a nail gun. It's so fast to use one of those. I'd recommend this. Of course, you need air lines and air compressor that I don't have shown. For cutting, you will need a handheld cutter like this and an angle grinder with the grinding wheel. For marking, tape measure, angle gauge, a framer square, I think they call that, regular square, hammer, you need a marking device. I've got this Sharpie here, don't use that, use pencil. I don't know what this is called. I call it a snap tile cutter. It's probably a real name, put it in the comments, but that you need as well. A wet saw. This is a mortar mixer. This looks like a drill, but it's a very low speed and high torque drill. A light duty drill, you'll burn it out before you mix your mortar. Mixing adapter. You need the mortar trowel. You need other trowels as well, just to help you dig it out of the bucket. You need a straight edge. Now this is a level. You don't care about a level so much. You just want something long and straight that you can use to push the tiles down. Tile spacers, grout float. You need a shop vac. Then you need grout. You have mortar, measuring container for water, and you need a bucket to mix the mortar in. With this tile job, I think I saved probably $2,000 or $3,000 in labor. It's a no-brainer. Buy the tools. You take off the baseboard trims, and now you can put the tile right up to the sheetrock, or you don't have to put it all the way up, but you definitely want to have the baseboard and the tile look like that when it's done. And then you want to have the tile slide underneath the door casing. This saw is called a multi-crafter. This blade goes back and forth and use a piece of tile turned upside down so you don't scratch the nice surface to give you the height. This piece comes out, nicely slide under like that. So removing tile and cleaning up the mortar underneath is by far the worst part of this job. I use a 1-inch bit to break the tile up, and then I use a 3-inch bit to clean the mortar off. When it comes to prepping the subfloor, there's really no substitute for just lots of nails. Every 4 inches in the center of the sheets, and then every 2 inches around the edge. An air nailer makes it way less complex. Several types of cuts you're gonna make. The easiest cut is a straight cut. Mark it, get rid of the square, and now you've got a straight cut. Now, if you have a cut that is either straight like this, or it's on an angle, but it's just one continuous line that cuts through 2 edges of the tile, you can run it through a scratch and snap cutter. It's probably another name, but anyway, that's what I call it. Now, if I, for example, wanted to cut the tile right there, I could slide it into the cutter and I could cut it right here. But this piece of tile is a 24-inch long tile and it's too long to fit in the cutter. So the only option I have is to run this through a wet saw. You have this type of cut. It's got 2 lines. You don't want to cut all the way through. Let's pretend this L-shaped piece was the good piece that we wanted to keep. And therefore we're gonna have to cut in here and stop, and cut in there and stop, and take this piece out and throw it away. You have to use a wet saw. It gets more tricky when you want a C-shaped let's pretend I wanted to do a C-shaped cut like this. How do you use the wet saw to cut this piece right here without cutting that way and without cutting that way? Well, you can't. You need to use a handheld grinder with a cutting disc and go in and just carefully cut the top like that. The big deal with a wet saw, you want to keep the blade wet. It's a really old one, but it works fine. I've got an old juice container, and every couple of cuts I make, I give it a drink of milk. This is noisy. You definitely want hearing protection, and you want some safety goggles. You definitely don't want to be forcing this through the blade. If you do that, you'll overheat the blade. You'll cause more chipping of the edge. We're gonna do some snap cutting. I'll show you how that works. This is an edge, and this is an edge that will be easy to cut in the snap cutter, scratch and snap cutter. But this little tiny edge right here is gonna be very difficult to get. And I'm gonna show you a way to get it using, well, sort of using the snap cutter. So, to make these pieces easy to deal with, I'm gonna put it in this cutter, line it up, and there's an arrow there that's hard to see in the camera, and then there's this track right here. This is a raised track, and these rubber surfaces are lower, and the tile will teeter-totter on that track on purpose. What I was doing is I'd start here, and I'd score across there with this cutter, this roller wheel right here, and it basically scratches the surface. And then I position it like this, and you come around here with the camera. You'll see that there's a foot, right? It comes down here, then there's a gap, then it comes down on this side, and it stresses the tile on either side of the part where you've scratched it, and it will snap it down there. What I noticed when I was doing one continuous line, the inside edge would always chip off one side or the other. So now what I do is I'll go to the inside, and I'll scratch it a couple times, just like that. Then I'll come back to the beginning, and I'll do one scratch the whole way. And then I put this in the middle, and if you zoom out a little bit, that's it. So I push down on the handle, and this edge is not very sharp with this type of tile, but there's some types that are porcelain, which is sort of a glass material. This edge can be extremely sharp. So one thing I've seen done is they take some kind of a stone and rub it on this edge to take the sharp edge off, just in case your fingers were gonna touch it ever, your bare feet or something like that. So I've got this just old grinding wheel. I don't take a lot of time doing it. I do that, and that's it. So here's what this cutter is not good for, is fine lines like that. That's like 3/8 of an inch. That's 1/8 of an inch or so. You can score it with that, which is, we will do that. And then there's another process to break that off. Or you could go to the wet saw and very carefully, cut very thin lines off. But you can't use this lever to snap that off. So put that back in, score that, and we'll talk about what to do in a minute. Okay, so we've got a nice score right along that line. The pencil mark came off, but that's okay. And what we're gonna do, see if this works. This is a special kind of pliers. When they squeeze together, they look like that, but when they're up against 1/4 inch tile, they're kind of flat. So let's see. So what happened was some of it broke properly, but the tip broke off.
I probably didn't score enough.
And that's
because
because yeah, or maybe my technique. But we'll just try this, see what happens here. Yeah, see how nicely that came off? Right here's where the stove is going to go, and you can see I've used up a few remnants, and also the refrigerator. And we've got a little decorative mosaic using up remnants. For mixing mortar, I take half of a 20 kilogram, 44 pound bag. Got a large mixing drill here. Regular drills will burn out before you get this mixed. Okay, there's our... It may be tempting to just put that down and get on with the job of putting the mortar down, but if you don't clean this up now, you're not going to get it clean in half an hour or an hour. So with a trowel, you can see that there are notches, and the height of these notches determine the height of the mortar as it's applied to the plywood. The first thing you're going to do is drop some mortar down and go in one direction and back in the other direction. You're trying to work it into the top surface so that it really bonds well with the top surface. We also vacuumed this, and I think it will adhere better. You're gonna add enough so that when you make your passes, you don't see any air bubbles on the peaks under here, and I'll show you that in a sec. Then, once you know you have enough material down, it's time to make your final pass with the trowel before you drop the tiles. Now, if you have a square tile, it doesn't matter so much, but if you have a rectangular tile like this, it's long this way and short this way, suppose there's an air bubble there. You want the air bubble to get pressed out as easy as possible. A lot of people think that if you just push on this, you're gonna push the mortar way out of the way and the tile's gonna settle in. It's extremely difficult to move the mortar out of the way and settle these deeper into the mortar. So you want to make the passage for air as short as possible. That means for a long tile like this, you want to make your lines like this. This trowel, if you hold it, I'm exaggerating here, but if you hold it like that, you're not going to leave much mortar on the floor. And if you hold it like this, you're going to leave a lot more, but it's extremely hard to push it when it's 90 degrees like that. So I found like a comfortable height is about here. The most important thing is that you're consistent through the whole job, because if you use it like this in one location and like this in another location, your floor is probably going to be uneven. Okay, so the apprentice is doing a beautiful job here. Beautiful job. The lines are going perpendicular to the long direction of the tile. And then I have them all marked. There's a 9 and there's a 9. So I know this tile goes right here. Pre-marked all these. What we're doing. You notice I'm not pushing them down hard. So next thing we're going to do is get spacers and put them in. Okay, so here we are. We've got the tiles laid out. We've got spacers set up between them. This is 1/8 inch spacing. So remember I said we're just going to drop them but not push them down? That's because once you set them down into the mortar, they're much harder to manipulate. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing all these forward so that they fit nice and tight to each other, and it does take a bit of work to do that sometimes. How I'm making sure that I'm sinking them so that there isn't an edge between two tiles is I'm using a straight edge. This is 2 foot level. I'm not checking for being level at all. I'm just trying to use this as a straight edge, and you make sure it would be no good to push like that. You want to have the straight edge staggering a joint or multiple joints in that case. It's just a back and forth thing, and you ideally, if you make your runs in your mortar like this, you only move the tile that way. Now, if these aren't flat, your stove and your fridge won't roll in here very nicely. Okay, so the grout we're using calls for 1 liter of water per bag. We don't want to mix that much at once. Adjust the ratio accordingly. You want the grout into a consistent thickness and color paste form. If you have a seam like this, it might be tempting to run your float like this, but the instructions recommend side to side at first. And of course, you're going to be pushing your grout in, and then once you've got it sort of flooded, you can go on a diagonal, but they recommend not in this direction. I've mixed it sort of a paste thicker than toothpaste, and I take a trowel, I'll work it back and forth. You wait about 15-20 minutes, and gently, with a very lightly damped sponge, clean off the surfaces of the grout lines. So that's really all there is to do it. This is an easy project if you have patience and the right tools. Good luck with your do-it-yourself.